Photographic Composition, Lecture 1, Introduction and Overview, Part 2. Fine art. The term fine art as applied to photography encompasses such diverse imagery that the term has become almost meaningless, except for one essential distinction. Many photographers create images with the sole intention of expressing themselves, very much like painters and sculptors do. Art, as beauty, may be in the eye of the beholder, but it also usually begins with the artist's intent. A lack of utility might be seen as part of this assessment. However, many photographs that have been created with utilitarian purpose in mind have earned art stature. The photograph of twins above is deadpan to the point of disturbance. Although the image is in color, its tonal range is quite narrow. This reflects choices made by the photographer as to wardrobe and possibly hairstyle. The light is soft to the point of being almost shadowless. But what's most compelling is the girl's mien. Ruby appears to challenge the viewer, while Sasha, with her hand on her sister's shoulder, seems slightly less confident. Does this constitute art? Food. Thousands of books and dozens of magazines exist to reveal the mysteries of food. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram can barely contain the snapshots of people's meals, memorable and otherwise, across the globe. We all eat and apparently can't help ourselves from sharing with others what we were about to consume or have even partly consumed. The process is so fascinating to so many. Almost all of these, taken with smartphones, look anything but appetizing due to poor lighting, an unsteady hand, soft focus, or the photographer's finger partially blocking the lens. There are those, however, who specialize in making food look irresistible. Usually done in collaboration with chefs and food stylists, this kind of work requires considerable preparation and an understanding of the most effective angles of view, depth of focus, and quality of light. Exposures usually have to be done within tight timelines, before the lettuce wilts or the ice cream melts, not shown here. Landscape, built. If you weren't paying attention, you might think this was a pretty idyllic setting. Beautiful trees of varying shades of green, yellow, and orange, shrubs, and a few flowers. An expanse of well-tended lawn between two equally well-cared-for houses, a gentle rise but no fence separating them. Sunlight bathes the scene in a warm glow, casting shadows toward the camera. There's more to it than that, though. The tree in the middle has no leaves, which may be the result of some naturally occurring blight, or it could be related to the function of the towers faintly looming in the background. Mitch Epstein is an artist first and foremost. However, that doesn't prevent him from presenting evidence of a world gone haywire. From the earliest days of the medium, photographers have exploited its ability to convey facts in a convincing manner. Jacob Riis and Louis Hine showed poor living and work conditions and were able to effect social change. Only time will tell whether Epstein and others can do the same for the planet. Landscape, natural. One thing that can be said about the world seen in most of Ansel Adams' photographs is that he captured it looking pretty much the way it had for thousands of years. And yet, this particular image is evidence that as much as things stay the same, they are also under constant, sometimes dramatic change. Storms have cleared from this scene countless times, but never in quite the same way twice, with clouds arranged just as these are, and sunlight streaking through them. More subtle is the change that has occurred from the erosion of wind, water, snow, and ice, that have had an effect on the boulders and mountains, albeit much more subtly. The power of this image derives compositionally from the repetition of bold shapes from foreground to background, the boulders carrying weight equal to that of the mountains. Facts not in evidence here are that Adams took this image while employed by the U.S. government to document the infamous Manzanar Relocation Center, where Japanese Americans were unjustly interned during World War II. This was a scene they knew well, both majestic and crushing. Light. If the only criterion for judging a photograph is its ability to describe objects, then this image would be seen as something of a failure. The human figures are hard to distinguish from one another, and none could be reasonably identified as an individual. Their shadows jut out toward the camera, distortions of the people from which they emanate. The structures seem two-dimensional, like silhouettes cut from construction paper. The vehicle at the curb and the streetcar down the street are no easier to define than anything else in the frame. Fortunately, literal description is not the only determining factor by which to evaluate a photograph. Its composition threatens to fly apart with so much darkness to the right, but is saved by the momentum of the human's shadows leading the eye toward the vehicle on the left. In the background, the bridge is balanced by the similar streetcar rounding the bend. Everything fits together like an interlocking jigsaw puzzle. Photojournalism. When anything noteworthy occurs in the world, the news media wants to be there. The more intimate the access, the better. It's their stock in trade. Hurricane Sandy slammed into the New Jersey shoreline and made headlines for days. The region was officially declared a disaster area, and the president made an appearance to examine the damage firsthand and offer comfort to those affected. When he spontaneously put his arms around a victim, Agence France Presse photographer Jules Samad was ready to record the moment, making sure to include New Jersey's Governor Chris Christie in the frame, along with a number of onlookers. The objective of the photojournalist is to sum up events in as few images as possible. This requires knowing what the important elements are, while always being ready to capture them in a visually compelling way. Until recently, success was measured by how often a photo was picked up by the newspapers and agencies. Today, it's determined by whether or not the image has gone viral online. Portraiture and people. The safe bet when photographing an iconic figure like Miles Davis for the cover of his album Pt2 would have been to make sure that he be seen in detail against a contrasting background. Irving Penn, though, well into his fifth decade of photographing famous, powerful people, had no interest in the safe bet and went instead for a high-risk strategy. Davis was well known as a brilliant, yet enigmatic performer who would often turn his back on his audiences during concerts. To convey the trumpeter's reluctance to enter the spotlight, Penn chose to limit his lighting scheme to two narrowly focused lights. We can tell by counting the reflections in his eyes, and no other illumination, direct or reflected. The result is the embodiment of intense defiance and an image not easily forgotten nearly 30 years after it was made. To be sure, Penn also hedged his bet by lighting his subject in a more conventional manner for alternate exposures, but this was the one ultimately chosen for the album cover.